Holy Cross. And on behalf of the Office of Advancement, I want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon for this webinar for alumni and parent volunteers. We'll be together for an hour, and after updates from Father Burrows, Rick Patterson, and Sean Matthews, Tracy Barlock, Vice President for Advancement, will be moderating the question and answer portion of the webinar. We have received several questions from you in advance, but we do encourage you to submit questions throughout this presentation. Please use the Q&A function that you see located on the control panel. We won't be monitoring the chat box, but of course we'll try to answer and cover as many questions as time allows. And finally, I want to note that this presentation is being recorded and will be shared with all volunteers. Now, it's my pleasure to hand things over to Sean Matthews, class of 1977, member of the Board of Trustees and chair of the Institutional Advancement Committee. Sean?
Well, thank you, Kristen, for that kind introduction, and good afternoon to everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining us. I hope this finds you, your family and friends healthy and safe. We're obviously living in and experiencing very unsettling times. It reminds us of the importance of staying connected and the importance of community. And for me, reinforces the importance of a Holy Cross education. And hopefully gives each of us every day an opportunity to be our best selves. As you know, we've hosted these kind of events before, virtual events before. Today we have over 200 people on the line, which is unprecedented. And I was looking at the invitee list today. It's from all walks of Holy Cross volunteers. So thank you again for being here. This is a clear sign that you deeply care about our college and how we are managing all the challenges of this pandemic. I can't think of a time when volunteer support and related work has been more important to the future of Holy Cross. You will hear on this call that we don't have answers to all the questions that we each may have. However, we do know at this moment in time, our care and concern for the college is paramount. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented amounts of creativity and passion. And I hope all of us can continue with the good work we've done in the past, be it talent, treasure, or whatever we can do. Let me start with a few acknowledgements. First, to Mike Shanahan, class of 1978, and president of the Alumni Association, and also a fellow trustee of the college. The work of the HCAA has been so important over the years and continues to be important at this moment in keeping us all connected. But I really want to thank the HCAA for making a great gift of $10,000 to the emergency fund. Thank you, Mike, for that and your leadership. A special welcome to those from the class of 2020 reunion committee. We know how hard you worked to prepare for your special celebration this year, and we are sorry you are unable to gather in June as planned. We are extremely disappointed for our seniors. Their last months on Mount St. James have been upended in a way we couldn't have imagined. It goes without saying that the Holy Cross alumni pledges its full support to help them in any way we can, now and after graduation. So it's my pleasure now to ask Father Burrows, chair of the board, to give us an update about things on college, and he'll be followed by Rick Patterson, our chair of the board. Father?
Great, thank you, Sean. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you here together. Even though we're not really together, we're together in a very new and different way for all of us. This morning, we were having a meeting of the cabinet, and the cabinet is the executive vice presidents and then some of the other key leaders on our campus. And I asked everybody two questions. I said, what are you most concerned about? And then what gives you hope in this really challenging time? And when I was listening to everyone's response to the second part, particularly what gives you hope? And over again, our senior leaders said, what gives me hope is the people that I work with who are working so hard, so creatively, so energetically, really to keep the functions and the community of the college going. And I kept hearing the same refrain, and really people kept saying, and this is who we are at Holy Cross. Well, you're also who we are at Holy Cross. The volunteers who make such a difference in keeping one another, in communicating, in raising funds, and helping us to celebrate the joy of being alums and students and faculty and staff and administrators at Holy Cross. So I can't thank you enough for joining in today. If you were on the President's Council call a few days ago, this is your moment to go to the refrigerator and get a snack. It's probably a little early for that glass of wine, but maybe these are unusual circumstances. But I just want you to feel free, because some of the things we're going to say today you heard before, and I just want to give you that permission now. This is your moment to get up and pretend it's a commercial. Now, I just want to remind you all, on the website for the college, if you pop the website up, there's a big gold band that goes across the top, and connected, that links you up to our COVID pandemic website, when we have all the letters, the communications, the things we're doing on the campus are contained there. And I just want you to be aware of that resources there. I also want you to know, and I think some of you have heard already, I was advised and then encouraged to move out of the Jesuit community and down into what's called the President's Apartment in Loyola. And so I did that because they were, I lived with 17 men, and half of us at least, including myself, are in that vulnerable group. And so they suggested that it might be good if I were a little more isolated. So I'm down there, and I'm saying Mass by myself every day. At the same time, they're celebrating in the community. And every day I'm praying for our alums, for our students, for our faculty and our staff. This community that's so important to who I am and who we are together. And I just want to assure you, as I pray for first responders, as I pray for people who are suffering and dying, as I pray for their families, I'm also praying in thanksgiving for the community that we are here at the college. As you might imagine, Holy Cross, Mount St. James is pretty quiet these days. We're all really working hard to use our best information, to use and decide who we are, what we're about, and how do we make decisions. But it's a challenging and unprecedented time that changes so radically day by day. Just when we think we have a handle on some aspect, something new happens, and we're off again trying to make things work. But it is important that you understand, and it's going to show up later in the next conversation when we get into the Q&A. A lot of folks, and ourselves included, like to know certain things. Well, what does this mean for you? Or when is this going to happen? And our alum, Tony Fauci, said once recently, the pandemic has its own schedule and it's not ours. And so we're trying to make good decisions based on the information we have, but that information is changing so rapidly. And these last 6 weeks particularly have been so intense here, as we eventually decided we had to move our students home. We had to go online with our classes. And finally, now we're all meeting like this through Zoom. We're forced to be nimble and creative and patient and highly engaged. And it's not been perfect. I mean, we're learning as we go. Our faculty are incredibly generous and dedicated to our students. And I don't think any of us saw this coming. And some faculty members, often by age, but not exclusively, are used to working online and communicating this way, and others are not so used to that. So the learning curve has been steep, but people are all working hard to communicate and effectively educate our students and form them. The two big values we've had and we've been operating out of is, how do we protect the health and safety of the members of this community, and how do we support the continued academic progress of our students? And those two commitments have really been gauging everything that we do. Yesterday, I think I spent, to protect our health and well-being, I think I spent 6 hours in Zoom meetings yesterday. And you do get a little cross-eyed by the end of the day. I don't know about you, but I find this mode of communicating is more exhausting often than in-person experiences. So you find yourself really tired at the end of the day. On campus now, we have 59 international students who were not able to go home. Many of them are Chinese. I'm pleased to tell you, I've heard from their parents in China. I've heard from the students themselves. I've heard from some of our international student alums commenting on the quality of care that we're showing to our international students. We've moved them all into Figge Hall. The Kimball Dining Services puts together, they have a little store, they call it, and 3 times a week our students go there and they can pick up groceries that they've asked for, or they can pick up prepared foods if they're not adept at cooking. They're doing their courses online too. And yesterday I was going up to the post office here on campus, and I ran into a couple of them. Of course, we're all masked and we were talking at 6 feet. And they were so appreciative of the care that Holy Cross has shown. And one of our parents in China wrote a letter to me in Chinese, which someone translated. And this man was really complimenting the college on how we were caring for his daughter. And he said, you know, in China, I listen to all these other parents whose children are abroad, and nobody is caring for our children the way you are. So I've been promoting Holy Cross. And just the other day, I was at my daughter's high school, and he said one of the students there came up to me and said, I just want you to know I'm an early decision student, and I've accepted to go to Holy Cross next year. So there is a sense of the care that we've extended and we try to extend to all of our students, and particularly now to our international students who are here on campus. Our online classes started on Monday, March 23rd, so we're now in week 4 of this methodology. We've done an assessment of our students and asked them a survey to tell us how it's going. And for the vast majority, it's going very, very well. It doesn't mean it's all going easily. It doesn't mean every class is as good as every other class, but it does mean that everyone is trying hard to make this work. It's not ideal, but we're very, very impressed with both our students' commitment to keep up with their coursework, but also our faculty's commitment to be creative and continually teach well the students that we have. I'm very, very impressed too with our class deans and our professional members of student affairs and the chaplain's office and coaches who are working so hard to stay connected to our students. As you know, all of our spring events have been canceled or postponed. Our June and July events on campus have also been postponed or canceled. Reunion weekends have been postponed, and our Maymaster programs have been canceled. Our Gateways orientation program, our summer school, and a number of other events we normally run, what we can put online, we are doing. And we're actually getting some wonderful, like today, we're getting some wonderful responses. For example, our Accepted Students Day was online, and a number of the students really responded. Actually, it's going to be online this weekend, but a number of students were working on chat groups ahead of time to kind of prepare, and they were very, very enthusiastic, and the numbers were very high. We're also looking now at our fall study abroad programs, and we're really wondering and hoping, but wondering, will we be able to open the campus in September as we usually do? I think a lot of campuses now are raising all the same questions. Our governor has changed the construction guidelines, and so all non-essential construction has been ended. There are some exceptions, but here on campus, our 3 construction projects, both the Performing Arts Center and the Luth, the Joe, the Recreation and Wellness Center, and our parking lot are all, at this moment, all have stopped until May 4th. And we're hoping at some point we'll be able to get back and keep working on those. We've also, working together with the City of Worcester, we've offered the Residence Hall Lehigh and with the City of West Boylston, the Contemplative Center for use for medical professionals and other first responders who need a place to go, who don't want to go home where they might contaminate their own families. Those offers have been extended. We haven't had anyone move in yet, but they're there, and we're, as the pandemic tends to, the numbers starting to get larger as they are, we're now the DCU Center where we have commencement is now a field hospital that can accommodate up to 200, and patients are starting to be sent there. So we expect in the next few weeks that these facilities that we've offered and readied for them may be used. We're also looking at how we're supporting different campaigns and concerns within the city itself. I can't thank enough our COVID-19 subcommittee of our emergency response team, who have just been extraordinary in all the ways in which they've engaged the issues that we're facing. And in particular, I want to thank Dr. Helen Boucher from the class of 1986. Helen is a member of our board of trustees, and she leads the division of geographic medicine and infectious diseases at Tufts Medical Center. And either I or members of the executive committee of the college are almost in daily contact with Helen, who's advising us on procedures and processes that we're doing. I'm most appreciative of Dr. Michael Collins, the class of 1977. Michael is the chancellor of the UMass Medical School here in Worcester, and he and I are in regular contact as well. And then, of course, our wonder star, Dr. Anthony Fauci, class of 1962, who's daily on almost every television station you can find, and whose balanced and thoughtful and measured approach to this pandemic has been critical. And his background with Holy Cross prompted both Conan O'Brien and Stephen Colbert, who were on a show the other night on television, they had a back and forth with each other. And as it turned out, both of their dads went to Holy Cross. And so they were commenting about the school and Dr. Fauci, and all of this publicity certainly is helping when you're in an admissions cycle. And speaking of admissions, for the first time this year, we had 2 rounds of early decision. Our ED1 round, the deadline was November 15th, and our ED2 round, the deadline was January 15th. And now with that, the ED group and the athletes, and now some of the regular decisions, we've accepted about 50% of our class already. We're notoriously, and most schools are, they get right up to that May 1st deadline. On the last day of June or last day of April, we'll all be wondering, you know, we may have 20% of the class that comes in on the final day, but this is a common phenomenon. So far, we have noticed no changes from our admissions from last year. So we seem to be on mark for where we're headed. Our total applications this year were just over 7,000. That's slightly less than last year, but it's more than the year before, so which were very good years for us. And the engagement among those admitted students with us has been very high. So we're waiting to see what's going to happen, and we're hopeful. What we do anticipate is that there's going to be a need both from our current students and incoming students for increased financial aid, given the turns in the economy. And that's a tricky reality to deal with. We already give out $70 million in financial aid annually, and this is a big challenge for us, so we're watching all of this very, very carefully. Before we get into finances, and I'm going to ask Rick Patterson, our board chair, to cover that, I just want to say a couple more things. We're very aware on and off campus of the emotional toll that this crisis is taking on all of us. Our employees, our students, our families, our alumni, parents, and friends, our whole larger campus community has been affected. My sister has had the virus. She's a nurse in Seattle, and she's better now. I have a cousin in London who had the virus. He's better now. But so many others are in very serious health conditions, and so many of those people who are dear to us have died. So we're very aware and constantly praying for you, but we also understand the importance of counseling for mental health services and for pastoral care. So our chaplains have started a weekly reflection series called Closing the Distance. It started, I started on the Sunday, the 4th Sunday of Lent, and then every day during the Holy Week, we had reflections. Easter Sunday, I was also on again, and now it will continue every Sunday that are coming forward. It's just a chance to reflect on the scripture readings of that day, and we are invited to join in and listen to those events. Additionally, the Student Affairs Group division has put out a whole website of resources for students to engage each other. The chaplaincy has also designed an online retreat run by students for students, and 70 students are currently on this retreat called Communitas. And amid all of our anxiousness, we're very aware. I was talking to Miles Cahill today, who's a faculty member who oversees our pre-med program. And Miles was talking about the number of physicians, Holy Cross trained physicians who did their undergrad here and went on to medical school, and the critical places they're serving their communities and the danger they're in. But this is part of what it means to be as a medical professional or a first responder with that Holy Cross spirit, which is to care for others, especially the most vulnerable. And we're very, very proud of all of them. And another person we're very proud of is our board chair, Rick Patterson. So let me turn it over to Rick to talk a little bit about our financials. I can see Rick, but his mute is on, so you can't hear him.
I do that every time. Thanks, Father Burrows. Thanks, Sean. I'm coming to you from Colorado today, where we've been for the last couple of months, and I will also excuse a couple of rementions for those of you who may have been on. I'm not a very witty person, but I thought I came up with a good one last week when I referenced this poster. It's a print over my shoulder of the Dine-In Library. And it occurred to me that this is where I learned the practice of social distancing to get away from my misbehaving roommates at the time. So how appropriate it comes back around. I'm in daily contact with the staff on campus, and I'm pleased to give you an update from the board perspective. Our campus leaders are working very hard, a lot harder than I am on behalf of Holy Cross. They are working 24/7, I think, and working to make the best decisions they can on a daily and weekly basis And the members of the Board of Trustees, many of us are working with them on a daily or weekly basis to ensure the Holy Cross can weather this crisis. We know there's going to be ramifications. We all know that, but it's imperative that we assess the decisions we make and work now to mitigate the effects of any really worst case scenario. I want to convey two important financial decisions that we made early on. The first was the commitment to keep all of our employees on full pay status until the end of our fiscal year, which is June 30. I note parenthetically that there's a big change. We're asking everyone to use their vacation and accrued leave time, which eases the financial burden of this significantly and will change our policy going forward. Secondly, we have committed to refund room and board for our students. So those credits were posted yesterday, and the combination of credits and refunds will be close to $7 million. Very meaningful for us. We understand those are very significant decisions. They have strong implications for our financial conditions, but we felt they were the right conditions to make right out of the gate with this deal. We did experience some revenue losses from a variety of things, conferences at Hogan, catering, athletics. Note you might find interesting round numbers. We lose $750,000 that we were anticipating. That's mostly from the NCAA men's basketball tournament. So let me pull the 2020 fiscal year numbers together for you. This year we'll end up with $19 million less in revenue than originally planned. We're round numbers, just over $200 million top line. And rather than operating surplus of some $5 million, which we invest our operating surplus each year back into facilities, we have a deficit of almost $3 million. This deficit of $3 million assumes we make our full annual fund goal, which we are hopeful and confident we're going to do. Our college has been very conservatively managed for over 50 years, and we've had an consecutive operating surplus for over 50 years. Like so many colleges, we're very dependent on tuition. That's our primary revenue driver, along with room and board. Our financial underpinning is solid, but we are also vulnerable depending on the longevity of this crisis. Some of you have asked about endowment. So annual distributions from our endowment, based on our longstanding policy, account for about 16% of our operating budget, which is very meaningful. When I joined the board 9 years ago, it was less than 10% was coming from our endowment. We estimate our endowment is off about 17% from peak to bottom. So we've come off the bottom, as many of you know. And that 17% drop is much less than many of the broad equity indices, at least. And today it stands somewhere north of $700 million. To be clear, the endowment is not a rainy day savings account. When I graduated in 1980, our endowment, I believe, was just shy of $2 million. So it's been a painstaking effort to grow it over time. And it really is a financial keystone for the college for present and future generations. We don't know how long this pandemic is going to last. Father Burrows talked about that and its timing. We don't know whether we'll have a resurgence of infections and what we'll be able to do. But we know had a real impact for this fiscal year for us, this academic year. And we know it's going to have a big impact for next year. Students have needs. We've had increased expenses to be online and do some other things. I think it's pretty safe to say our financial prospects for 2021 are more challenging than they were for 2020, which is our worst year in a very, very long time. So that's what we're facing. And, you know, there are scenarios that are very bad, right? The good news, however, is our campaign for Holy Cross has been terrific, fabulously successful. And thank you to the enormous generosity of so many of you over these last 5 or 6 years, and the tireless efforts of Father Burrows, Provost Frigi, Tracy, and her team worked really hard to do this for our college. It's a blessing because now it gives us flexibility to pivot our message and energies around some of the most important priorities of today. So that's annual fund, it's financial aid, emergency funding for unanticipated expenses, and some other things that we probably can't foresee at this very moment. So I've had many emails and calls over the last few weeks from alumni asking what they can do. Like Father Burrows, I've actually had a few over the last week asking how they can get access to Dr. Fauci to do things into the future. I don't have that hotline number. So again, thank you. And let me turn the program back to Sean.
Thank you, Rick. Very helpful overview. I think it's very important that all our volunteers understand what's going on at the college, some of the challenges, some of the decisions that are being made, since our volunteers are on the front line. And we're hoping with this dialogue today, we can make your work easier. Let me also add to Rick's point that we will get through this crisis, but to do so, we need our volunteers' continued support. So as it relates to fundraising, for the past 5 years, we've hosted a giving challenge. These efforts have been very successful, both in terms of increasing the number of donors and dollars. And it's been a great way for alumni to connect and also to bring in some friends as part of our support. As many of you know, our challenge was scheduled for January over the winter homecoming, but with the tragic events with the women's rowing team, we postponed the challenge. And we chose a date in April to coincide with our Holy Cross Cares effort. However, we needed to postpone many of those Holy Cross events around the country. And so we've had to pivot again. And that's changing our messaging platform to one where we're going to speak about caring and supporting our students. We still plan to host a 24-hour event that's going to take place this Friday, April 17th, but it's not going to be a challenge. It's simply going to be a day to make a gift to show support to Holy Cross. The theme is Power of Purple, and we need all of your help to make this successful. By participating, by volunteering, by supporting the effort yourself, and by spreading the news. Many of you will be participating in training calls over the next couple of days, hosted by Christine Riando and her team. The advancement team at Holy Cross has been working hard to prepare for this event, and we are excited to be partnering with all of you. There will be several emails that will go out over the next couple of days, and we will launch the Power of Purple with a very interesting video that'll be sent out Thursday night, and again, I believe again on Friday morning, so stay tuned. Finally, I'd like to move back to our seniors for a second. They were all looking forward to graduation, and we're excited about that for them, but they're walking into a very uncertain climate. We have an incredible network of alumni, and this is the time to step up with internships, jobs, job shadowing, career connections, any kind of counseling you can give. So if you're able to help, please get in touch with the career office or with Tracy and her team, and we'll be able to get that connected. The advancement office is working really hard to provide opportunities to keep everyone connected through these webinars and other digital events. If you have ideas on how we can do this better or with more impact, please let us know. Our community, our volunteers, our alumni, parents and friends, all have been incredibly supportive and loyal. And we are very, very grateful for the many ways you help Holy Cross and provide leadership. So I think, Tracy, I'd like to turn it over to you for some question and answer now, and I'll keep track of the time. I know we have a 4 o'clock deadline, so or a hard stop, I should say. So Tracy Barlick, thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Father Burrows. And welcome, everybody. I'm thrilled to have yet again another large number of Holy Cross volunteers dialing in, listening in, videoing in. It's important to keep you up to speed on all that's happening here at the college. Some of you sent some questions in via the invitation that we sent out to the webinar a few days ago. So I'm going to start with some of those, and then I see a few on the Q&A. A reminder that you can add a question there if you want to while we're discussing, and I'll try to get to those as well. So the first one, Father Burrows, is for you. Is the college pursuing any of the federal or state loan programs?
Yes, thanks, Tracy. We certainly are. We've been looking at the CARES Act and how it can help alleviate some of our burdens of the time. It was estimated, at least because we haven't received checks yet, but it was estimated we might get a check for about $2 million through the CARES Act. And I think $1 million of that has to go directly into students and student issues. And then another $1 million can go into the needs of all of this transition and the kind of the costs that are associated with that. As Rick indicated, I mean, $2 million is very helpful in those different directions, but we have a lot to be concerned about. So we're keeping an eye on that. We're talking to the legislatures. We're talking through the different associations we belong to at higher education associations to lobby for the needs and concerns of higher education. As compared to many institutions, we're very blessed, but it's all very fragile as well, the larger context of higher ed today. So absolutely, we are looking at those programs carefully and trying to lobby for adequate funding for higher education to support the dilemmas that we're in right now.
Great, thank you. Rick, this one's for you. You mentioned endowment and the endowment losses that we've seen. There's still a fairly significant amount of money in the endowment. Why can't we use the endowment to help with the cost of this emergency?
Well, a variety of reasons. First off, that's not the intention of an endowment. It's not a savings account. Endowment, by definition, implies it's for future generations as well as present generations. So this generation gets the benefit of $35 million a year. And hopefully, and the intention is that is around for forever and then some. The other part is a significant fraction of the endowment are in restricted funds, essentially based on donor intention. So endowed professorships, chairs, offices, and the like. So those, by contract, by law, we couldn't touch and use for other things. So those are really the primary reasons for that.
A quick follow-up to that was, do we have a quasi-endowment?
I'd appreciate some color on what a quasi-endowment is. Any ideas for me?
None.
Maybe this person is asking.
This is in advance.
Oh, it was in advance. I'm sorry. No, we don't. Our liquidity position is pretty good at the college. We had some money set aside on our balance sheet for our big construction projects. So you could argue those are spoken for, but so maybe that's a quasi endowment. It's sort of set aside funds for a specific project. But otherwise, there's no other kiddies around.
Sometimes it's funds set aside to use for emergencies, and that's not the model that we have used here. It also should be said, is that our endowment then gets invested so that it's producing income over a long period of time. So endowment funds are held in investment pockets that are locked in for so many years at a time with particular investment managers. So we don't have, once you've made a commitment to an investment manager, it's locked in for a certain period of time, and it's not like we can go in and then take it back out again because we want to use it. So that's how we fund into the future and make sure that over the course of the next years, both how the college functions and its budget, but also how we support realities like $70 million in financial aid each year are helping funded.
Thank you. Sean, you talked a lot about the Giving Day and its importance. Do we have a donor or dollar goal for the Giving Day? And how will the dollars be used? I think you might have talked about some of this in your remarks.
We don't have a specific donor goal in terms of dollars or number of participants. I think this is a huge opportunity for us to reconnect as a community. So it's I believe it's one of those times of hope that Father Burrows talked about. If you look at the annual fund right now, we're about $5 million from goal. And as Rick said, I believe that's very doable between now and year end. So we're hoping to put a big dent in that $5 million goal during the Giving Day. And that will be part of our focus. And I want to reiterate, as we go through the Giving Day and the annual fund, it's really important that we focus on some of the priorities that were discussed before. Like we need money for financial aid. There are going to be students that are impacted by this challenge. The emergency relief for students is very important, and that will be one of the things in particular in the challenge that will be highlighted as a direction for money. Rick talked about the refunds as it relates to room and board. The annual fund can help offset that as well. And we're going to need resources to continue to deliver our academic programs for students. So For everyone on the phone, unrestricted dollars are what we need right now, and we would encourage that as in the near term, because that'll help us get through this little bump that we're facing right now.
Thank you. A question for you, Father Burrows. Do we have any idea how many students, faculty, or staffs may have contracted the coronavirus? Or do we know of others who have been affected in our community?
I've seen the figure recently that we know of, that 9 of our students currently or have had in the last few weeks the virus, and 1 of them is in the hospital, but I don't know who that is. We've had the grandfathers of 2 of our students die from the virus. The father of 1 of our students died of the virus, and I think we currently have an employee in the last few weeks who has the virus. That's what we know. I would assume, though, that we have cases that, given the fact that our students have all gone home and are in very different environments, we may not know all who has the virus or not. So I would assume that's a rather conservative number.
I know admissions is doing online tours and chats, etc. Is there a temporary plan in place for interviews during this summer and fall? And I think I will try to answer that one. And I think the answer is yes. We are trying to figure out what that might look like. As this writer indicated, we are moving our orientation programs online. In fact, this Sunday, we are doing our Accepted Students Day online. I'm not quite sure what that will look like, but I know there are a lot of people putting a lot of time and effort into ensuring that it's an engaged, event for students. And we're trying to connect as many prospective students with current students as we possibly can. I guess the good news is every institution is in the same boat. And so perhaps there'll be a little competition around, well, the orientation or the accepted student days at XYZ institution was a little better than this one. We don't have the benefit, unfortunately, of bringing people onto the campus and seeing the beauty of this place. So we have to convey it in other ways. And I think a lot of that is done through our students, and it's done through all of you on the phone, through our alums and the connections that you have. So I suspect our admission staff is working hard at thinking about how to interview students over the summer and continue that process ongoing. Father Burrows, if students are not allowed on campus this summer, or if the academic year is postponed, how are we imagining what we might be doing?
We're trying to prepare. This is a great question because it's on everybody's mind, including my own. Part of the reality is we're trying to imagine different scenarios. So we're all planning around what happens, for example, if we can start school 2 weeks late. What happens if we can start regular classes on campus a month late? What happens if the whole fall semester, things are loosening up, but we can't accommodate, maybe everyone has to be in a single room, a person to a room. How do we then manage all of these? So we're looking at how do we use our fall break, our spring break, our long January break, and adjust the possibility of getting the same number of courses in and breaking it down into different segments. All of these are just examples of the ways in which we're trying to think about how else can we do this. I mean, one option would have you splitting the semester. Maybe half of a class comes on for the semester because they need lab science courses and other things that require being here. Another half takes their 2 courses, say, at home online, and then they flip. Now, that's very complicated. There's all kinds of logistic problems. So every time we come up with an idea like that, we then have to start playing out all of the implications. What does that mean for housing? How does it mean for employees? What does it mean for what does it mean for athletics? What if we don't have a fall or sports, season this year because of this? All of these are questions we're trying to look at and analyze, obviously with the hope we don't have to use them, but planning for the fact that we might. And so there's so many unknowns. I mean, I think Rick had already mentioned, we could have a second wave of the pandemic, which could make it impossible to return. The fact that we don't really know is, today when everyone was putting on in that cabinet meeting, what do you worry about the most? The huge comment was uncertainty. It's so hard to plan when you can't determine what you're really dealing with. And so every time you think you might have an idea about something, we've had a new restriction or a new change in numbers, or, what is the wave doing? I was at lunchtime, I was watching the governor of New York talk about the wave in New York is just sitting in New York City is starting to drop just a bit. Is that just a dip? Is it going to mean something? They don't know. So I think we're all in the same place, and all colleges are doing the same thing that we're doing. We're just trying to say, how do you manage this again? I asked our academic side of the house that we need to put on a lot more resources this summer in the classes for faculty. If we have to go online again in the fall, we need more training in how to do that effectively. It's not really, I think we went into emergency mode. That's different from really online learning. So if we had to do that again, what would that mean? No one wants to do that again, believe me, but if we had to, and then the next question is, if we had to do that, how might that affect enrollment? Someone might say, well, I'll take a gap year rather than come and do it that way and come back in a year. So there's all of these implications, and something affects enrollment, finances, student affairs, academics, courses. Everything is connected, and everything is on a basis that's unknown. And this is probably the challenge that every business is facing. It's certainly the challenge our government is facing. It's the challenge higher ed is facing.
I suspect these next series of questions will sound somewhat, your answer will sound somewhat similar. But one, there was a follow-up to the students who may or may not come back. You know, do we have any students who actually asked to take a gap year or defer? At this point, and I can answer that, I don't think we have. That is not to say that that won't happen if we make a decision, or if there's a decision about, you know, postponement of the start of the academic year, or some other, you know, decision needs to be made because of the health and safety of our students. And I can tell you there's a great little piece in the New York Times today about sort of the future of higher education, how this is affecting all of us. And from the MITs and Harvards to the Bowdens and Colbys and Bucknells and Holy Crosses, every institution is thinking about all of these things. And I think for us, I think we suspect it will be sort of an industry-wide kind of, you know, response to these things. And some schools will probably be able to react better than others. I think our hope is that we are in a position to be nimble and flexible, depending on how we have to manage. Rick, this might be a good one for you next, which is, what is the board's role in engaging in this sort of these conversations about recovery and about scenarios?
I think our role is just sort of to bring some outside expertise and contacts to bear. So a few of our trustees have specific experience that's relevant to this. So when another trustee who's been helpful is Doug Baker, who's CEO of Ecolab, whose company came up with the protocols and materials to open the Four Seasons Hotel in New York for hospital workers. So he's provided those protocols to us for use in potentially having Lehigh serve as housing for medical workers. So in the moment it's that, and I think it's really, we are a committee-driven board, so people are working actively within the committees, yours, institutional advancement for sure. The investment committee has been meeting almost every other week to be updated on the status of the endowment and any changes we choose to make. We're not making dramatic moves because, as Phil said, many of our funds are committed. And then on the finance side, so it's working with Dottie Halver and her team to just be a sounding board in producing the, you know, what a profit and loss statement looks like for some of these different scenarios. Ultimately, I would say, you know, it could come down to some, you know, big questions down the road, you know, if scenarios get very bad, you know, it's like, how much, I think the board has to have involvement and sign off an agreement on some of the real downside scenarios and actions to be taken. But so far, you know, we are very on board with how things are being managed.
Great.
Can I jump back to the quasi endowment for a minute? Somebody did clarify it. I think Mike Shannon in the sideboard. So some colleges do have a quasi, and so it's sort of a presidential fund is how I know it at some other schools, where the president has access to a bucket of money that's off the side that he can use for whatever he wants. I don't believe we have one of those, and if we do, it's not of significance.
Rick, if we do, no one told me, and this is my 9th year here.
Yeah.
I also just compliment what Rick had said, and he and I talk about often, is the distinction between management and governance. So the board is the governance body that oversees and looks at all the things we do. The management of how we hire and how we manage issues and that belongs to the president, the vice president, et cetera. And the board stands back and looks at the overall view. And if we were to get into a situation, for example, if we were worried about closure, or we're worried about, we're radically changing how we function, we'd obviously be engaging, because we're talking to each other all the time, engaging the board for their wisdom, for their guidance, but the management is of the day-to-day, and how we function as an institution relies with the administration. So I probably have been in few places that work as well in this distinction as we do, and our board, partly because so many of our board members are alums and they are so committed to the college. Our board members, for example, are major drivers and contributors to our campaign, and the kind of generosity that fuels and we talk a lot about, well, what are our priorities and how might we improve life on campus, and what do we need to do for students, and their enthusiasm and perspectives often then fund the kinds of things we're trying to, the kind of projects that we have in mind, or the direction that we want to go. So there's a wonderful dialogue that goes back and forth. And the board hires and fires me. So if things go really awry, I get to retire soon.
Kristen, are you able to be live here? Are you still on?
She's got her now.
No, I'm here.
Okay. Well, there's a question that perhaps you and Father Burrows could talk about a little bit, which is around plans for commencement. And on a previous conversation with some volunteers and others, Father Burrows mentioned possibilities of combining reunions or commencement and reunion classes, and I guess I'll just sort of leave you with that to comment on that. Probably we're trying to think of all different kinds of ways to celebrate our various milestones that we're missing.
Absolutely. And of course, the priority is our students, and seeing that they get their in-person celebration. And if there are opportunities, of course, to be able to layer in any of our reunion classes, there's so many ideas out there. We've received tons of great ideas from alums in reunion classes. We're looking at other institutions and how they're handling this, but it's a great opportunity, I think, to be able to be creative.
Now, let's reiterate, because we've said it in a couple of contexts, but on the 22nd of May, we're going to do something to acknowledge, this is not commencement, but to acknowledge it's the official graduation day and the NROTC commissioning day. So we're going to do something online that's kind of fun, but it's not intended to be an online commencement, which some schools are doing. And we've made a commitment to have an in-person commencement here. Again, the dates, we've looked at dates in late August, we've looked at dates up into October on a weekend. Could we find some dates that, depending on the waves of this pandemic, that would allow us to regather on our campus? And maybe that's where, if we were doing something for current students, maybe the 25-year and 50-year classes of reunions would want to join in. But we've got to, we're still waiting we're trying to plan some options, and scenarios, knowing that that's all they are until we get a better sense of how this disease is being managed.
Thanks. A question about the emergency fund. Is the emergency fund considered an unrestricted fund? I'll take that one. Yes and no. I think that if you listen carefully to both what Sean and Rick and Father Burrows said, the college has incurred an enormous amount of added expense related to this emergency, to this pandemic. So any dollars that come in are not only helping to offset that, but we know these emergency needs are going to continue. Whether it's reimbursement, which is completely appropriate and fair to families, of room and board, but we had unexpected expenses that just happened when we had to literally, move our students out in 3 days, and we still have students living here that need help. There's still students at home who need help. We have many students who are from families where they're struggling mightily, and we want to be a source of help when we can be to them. So I think every dollar that comes in that is unrestricted is really used for these emergency purposes. Sean mentioned that we have $5 million left to hit our budgeted annual fund goal. And I am also very hopeful that we can do that between now and the end of the year. We see almost $4 million alone come in the month of June. For those of you who know, this is a scenario for Holy Cross graduates. You all make your gift at the end of the fiscal year. If we could push those up a little bit, that would give us a little more I think freedom and understanding about what the end of the year might look like for us. But we just felt like it was enormously important as part of the Giving Day to say every gift is going to help our students in need and our community in need. I mean, there are people here caring for our students that are still working, and that's hugely important. Sean, I'm going to close with one last question for you, and you and I can, and maybe Kristen can tag team this, and all of you, Rick too. What are the 3 most important things our alums can do to support the college in the next couple of weeks? And I'll add in the next couple of months, actually.
Oh, you're probably stealing my closing remarks.
There you go. I'll let you
So
do that.
first of all, not looking too far ahead, let's just look till Friday. Let's give the Power of Purple a huge success, and let's use it as a way to reconnect with all of our alumni and friends. The second is goes to your June point, which is class. That will be the final month of the Holy Cross Fund. All the class agents recently received a kit from Christine's office, and I guess there'll be some more training on that over the next couple of days. We need our class agents to be as engaged as they've ever been, and to use the development office as much as they need to push towards that $5 million raise that we're trying to do. And I think the third thing I think about goes back to our seniors, because I do think there's a huge talent pool in the alumni network. And I think we need to continue to engage with the alumni network and accelerate how we might work with seniors as they graduate and take that next step in their life. So I think there's a lot of huge talent and resource in the alumni body that can be helpful there.
I might just add one. I'm certainly supportive of those. Every once in a while, when we get in a setting like this, I'll hear alums say, we do talk a lot about finances, and yes, because we're a private institution and we're dependent on them. But I also want to say, and I live the mission locally. So if there are people in your neighborhood that you can creatively reach out to and let them know that you care about them, even though you're behind a glass window or 6 feet away or whatever it is. How do we live who we are or in the communities where we are? And how do we, reach out to people electronically or at a distance who just need to know they're being thought of, they're being cared for, and how do we love our families with greater patience and generosity when maybe we're all a little bit too close to one another at times? That's also part of what it means to be living in ways that reflect who we are and what we've been given here at Holy Cross.
Well said.
Sean, before you close for real, let me just say there are some questions left in the Q&A, and we're going to try to get to some of them offline. So I wanted you to know that some of them are repeats, and some of them we just didn't have time to. But I want to try to get to them if we can.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. And thanks to everyone for joining today. And thank you, Father Burrows, for your comments at the very end. Men and women for others. I think that's what it's all about. So thank you very much. We hope that your families and you stay safe. Everyone on the phone, thank you again for your engagement, your time, and your commitment to Holy Cross, its alumni and its students. It's very much appreciated. And everybody have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.